Hi everybody, how you doing? My name's Jose. You probably know that. You're probably gonna post this on Facebook or whatever. Or maybe I'm gonna post it on YouTube. I'm not sure. But I do want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite saints, Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas is awesome. He's my boy. And yeah, he's pretty cool. Thomas Aquinas for me is one of the most important saints, one of the most important doctors of the church, right? Now, why, right? It's not like he's the only doctor. Of course not. We have Augustine. We have, later on, we have John Henry Newman. And we have all these, doctors, Cardinal Ratzinger, Karl Wojtyła, 20th century. But in the Middle Ages, we had the saint, Saint Thomas Aquinas. And, theology was never the same afterwards. I'll tell you that much. Why? Because here's the thing. Thomas, in his writing Summa Theologica, was able to perfectly marry faith and reason. In our society today, we either think faith is here and reason is here, and they should never touch each other, or we favor one the most, right? Oh, we love our faith, but we don't really have to think about it enough, right? We don't have to think about it. Or we love to think and we love to be intellectual, but no room for faith. Thomas saw the two, and he did what the Catholic tradition states. He married them together. And it almost seems normal today, especially in theology, right? To marry faith and reason. Thomas was able to take this and both, right, of faith and reason, and he was able to put it down, at least some of it, on paper, right? And that's why we have the Summa Theologica. The Summa is one of the most important documents, right? It is so important that during the Council of Trent, not only was scripture there, right? But the saint's writing, Summa Theologica, was there. It became essential to apologetics. Afterwards, it became essential in sorry, I'm trying to explain. It became essential in the, the Counter-Reformation. So, Summa Theologica. I keep on clapping. One of my favorite articles from Summa Theologica is probably the most famous. I guess I'm a pleb. But it's on whether God exists, right? And this isn't like, a secularist acting this. This isn't an agnostic acting this. No, we're talking about a mystic, right? Someone who's experienced God before, who already has a love for the Blessed Sacrament, right? We're talking about a Dominican friar asking the question on whether God exists. It goes to show the honesty and the sincerity that St. Thomas Aquinas had, right? He was willing to ask anything. Nothing was off the table because he had so much confidence in God that he knew God would provide him the answers. And that's what I love about St. Thomas Aquinas, is that he was able to be honest and ask questions, right? In a time where I thought back then, when I was first starting out, I thought that people didn't really question, right? It was usually, oh, you just follow blindly and that's it. Wow, was I wrong, right? And I figured that out afterwards, right? There wasn't people around me that were doing it, but I had that natural perception of that. And St. Thomas Aquinas opened my eyes to theology in itself, which is, my interest in today. So one of the famous arguments, whether God exists, right? Dominican friar asking this question. As far as if that's on the table, anything else goes, right? So Thomas is able to ask the essential question. And Thomas doesn't burn down straw men. Here's what I mean. He doesn't how sometimes we get into an argument and we try to say the other side. So it's like, meh. No, right? Thomas formulated the argument of the other side probably better than they were going to formulate it to him. So for example, right, he wouldn't just say, well, people don't believe in God because they're stupid. No, he would present proper arguments against his point. For example, and that same whether God exists, there's a objection. that he rises, and he says, if something is infinite, then the opposite of it can't exist. So for example, if there's infinite heat, there wouldn't be any cold, right? Because infinity is infinity. So thus everything else subsides. If there's infinite heat, there shouldn't be no cold. If there's infinite water, there shouldn't be no, you know what I mean? God is infinitely good, but there's evil in the world. So since there's evil, God can exist. If God is just infinite good, then how can he exist if there's evil in the world? That's a pretty good argument against the existence of God. And this is by a Dominican friar, right? A priest. Thomas answers this, right? And he answers it saying, not his own quote, but he quotes Augustine and saying that evil is allowed to exist so that a greater good can be brought about, right? It makes so much sense. But to me, it amazes me how humble he was to present the opposing argument so well. And then, you know, the article goes on and he talks about the 5 proofs of God existence, which is, you know, today when we're doing apologetics for atheists, agnostics, and secularists, these are the arguments that come in mind, right? The argument for motion, the argument of contingency, you know, the argument of desire, you know, stuff like that. My favorite is the argument of motion. And it goes like this, right? Things don't move themselves. There's a cause to it. Something doesn't move by itself. Something causes something to move, right? So for example, my hand moved me. What moved my hand? I did, right? So my hand pushed, right? That's the cause. My hand is the cause, and the effect is the push, right? So we have the cause, we have the what caused it, and we know the effect. We come from our parents, and our parents come from parents, and our parents come from parents, and it goes like this timeline, right? It can't continue forever, right? Because then we're going to ask, well, where did they come from? We can't fall into what they call an infinite regress, which is a logical fallacy. It's a logical error. So thus, there must be a mover that puts things into motion, but is not affected by the movement. That is which we call God, right? But Thomas probably formulates it better than I can because it's his argument, duh. Summa Theologica, just filled with the brim, with just theology, right? And it's not only just theology, it's presenting the counter arguments, answering the counter arguments, and then answering the answer, which is, you know, Thomas, he's great. But what doesn't really translate in his writings is how much of a mystic he was. We think about Thomas Aquinas and we think about somebody who's very stern and just writing, right? But Thomas, he had the faith of a child, right? I'll give you a couple examples. One of them was he was very scared of thunderstorms, right? He had a past with thunderstorms, and where a thunderstorm killed not only his sister but his sister's nurse. And so, like at around the 13th century, right, when he was a Dominican friar, the moment he would hear thunderstorms, he would hide, not in his room, not in the basement, not under the bed. He would seek refuge to his Father in the tabernacle, the Eucharist, and he would put his head in there. Kind of like a child, when there's a thunderstorm, he goes to his mom and dad. For Thomas, that was his refuge. His refuge was the Eucharist. Whenever he was stuck on his writings, he would go to the tabernacle and he would beg Jesus. He would hug the tabernacle and he would beg the Lord, help me. Help me do your will. Thomas was humble. He had the faith of a child. That's what I love about Thomas. No one else sees it, right? He's very humble about it. In fact, when he was writing, Peter and Paul appeared to him, started explaining to him the scripture in general. And Thomas didn't really write about it. He didn't tell anyone but a person. And that was his closest friend in the friary. It's amazing. It's incredible to me that, someone can keep a secret like that, I would be so amazed. I'm like, I have to tell Jesus. But, yeah. Thomas was a fantastic writer, but he was also a mystic. He had childlike faith. He loved the Eucharist. In fact, we get our word transubstantiation from Thomas Aquinas. When we do the Corpus Christi, the day of Corpus Christi, the liturgy was written by Thomas Aquinas. Eucharistic adoration, the two songs, the Salutaris and the Tatum Ergo, those are written by Thomas Aquinas, right? Thomas Aquinas had an affinity for the Eucharist. It was his refuge. I think as a society, we need to learn how to use the Eucharist as a refuge. He's our everything. It's Jesus Christ fully incarnate there. Why wouldn't we? But yeah, Thomas for me is an important figure in my life. And I thank God that he was able to help me understand him through Thomas, right? But Thomas didn't write everything. And that's the great thing, where Thomas was so humble, he understood that he would never be able to encapsulate the full essence of God, right? We can't put God in a box, right? We'll never be able to fully understand God. That's why the faith and reason and the marriage together, right? He didn't overemphasize on reason, but he didn't overemphasize on credulity, on faith. It was a marriage. It's both together, beautifully together. They weren't enemies. They were lovers. It's amazing. But Thomas in his writings, he couldn't write everything. And so after a mass, it said that he witnessed something so incredible that he said he couldn't write anymore. That what he experienced was so great that all his other writings are like straw. It's nothing. Nothing. It's like nothing. One of the greatest doctors of the church. And his humility is what stands out the most. As Thomas was finishing, right? Thomas never got to complete the Summa Theologica. Why? Because Jesus told him to stop, right? He could have been stubborn. He could have been like, but Lord, I'm not done yet, right? I've still got a couple paragraphs to go. Jesus goes, Thomas, you have written well of me. What do you want in return? And Thomas, having the opportunity to ask God for whatever he wants, says, I want nothing but you, Lord. Wow. Thomas Aquinas is incredible. In the end, I love Thomas. I think Thomas Aquinas is one of the greatest doctors of our church. I think that he himself is a fantastic role model and an example about how we should live and how us following God like children can lead others to him as well. Brother Thomas, I don't know, Saint Thomas Aquinas, thank you for your intercession. Thank you for offering your life to Jesus. And I pray that others are able to do that, the same. so that we can have new saints in this generation. And I guarantee you, you follow God, you'll never be the same again. Depend on him. And in the end, in return, you'll bring others to his feet as well. God bless. It's been a long... He's on the pop charts today. Let me see. Alright, let's see what there is. Rockstar, Havana, Gucci Gang. No. No, I can't. No. Good. No, never mind. Let's see. The Good Goodbyes. Okay. Bodak Yellow. What could that be about? Like a Kodak commercial? Let's see. Bodak Yellow. Here it is. Okay, I found it. All right. Let's see how it is. Nope. All of my nope. Something else. Please.